Hello and happy Friday. Welcome everyone to the final day of our AOML virtual open house. My name is Christina Keist and I will be moderating today's webinar. This series is brought to you by NOAA's Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory, or AOML, in Miami, Florida. We hope that this webinar helps you get to know the people who make AOML's research possible. Throughout these webinars, we've explored hurricanes, ocean currents, and coastal ecosystems. But today, we are wrapping up our open house series with a Q&A. Our panelists will be answering questions about their career and their research experiences. So before I invite our panelists to begin speaking, I would like to share our guidelines. All participants are muted to ensure the best possible audio during the webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a question box on your GoToWebinar panel in the bottom right. Please write your questions for our speakers there and we will read them aloud for you. We encourage you to ask questions as you go along, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. But if we don't get to yours, it may be featured on our social media accounts and answered there. So follow us on Instagram and Twitter at NOAA-AOML for more content. Now I'd like to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Evan, why don't you go ahead and kick us off by introducing yourself? Let me get the slide going.
Good afternoon. My name is Evan Ford, and I'm an oceanographer at the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory, where I've been working since the summer of 1973 when I started as a student intern. I have done all sorts of oceanography, marine geology and geophysics, marine biology, marine physics, and currently I'm doing research with satellite sensors, looking at elements of the atmosphere that impact whether or not hurricanes form and how they intensify. So I'm glad to be able to be with you today, and any questions you have about oceanography, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Evan. Alejandra.
Hi, I'm Alejandra Lorenzo, and I've been at AOML since I started as an intern in college. And my job is to provide infrastructure support from an IT perspective. My degree is in computer science, and I initially started at AOML as a research computer scientist, but now I provide user support.
Thank you, Alejandra. Heather.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Heather Holbach. I am a hurricane researcher at AOML. I'm also an employee of Florida State University, and I'm a cooperative institute employee with NOAA through the Northern Gulf Institute. I've been working with AOML since I was a graduate student, and I began working with them in 2013, and upon completing my PhD in 2016, I came on full-time. I serve as the expert on one of the instruments called the Stepped Frequency Microwave Radiometer that flies on the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. And my main research goal is to improve our measurements of surface wind speeds in hurricanes.
Thank you, Heather. Michael.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Michael Stutterman. I am an assistant scientist with the University of Miami's Cooperative Institute for Marine and Atmospheric Science. I'm also affiliated with NOAA AOML through my position at UM. Broadly, I'm a coral reef ecologist, but I specialize in coral diseases and treatment, as well as integrating advanced molecular techniques into assessments of coral health. And a lot of my previous work has been with mesophotic coral ecosystems, which are found deeper than about 100 feet throughout the Caribbean. And so the video that's playing right here shows some work that I did in Cuba back in 2017 to explore and characterize those ecosystems. So I'm happy to field any questions about the state of coral reefs in Florida and beyond, and anything you have, I'd love to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Diego.
Hi everyone, my name is Diego Ugas, and I'm one of the electrical engineers within the engineering group at the Physical Oceanography Division here in our lab at NOAA AOML. I'm also a Cooperative Institute Marine and Atmospheric Sciences employee, and most of what I do in my role at the laboratory is helping maintain systems that gather data for our oceanographers and making sure that our deployments and our recoveries for such systems go well, and make sure I can troubleshoot and ensure that we're getting and collecting good quality data for our scientists back at the lab. So if there's any questions about my research, my work out in the field, or what I do in the lab as an engineer, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Thank you, Diego. Okay, and we had a few questions to start, so let me just get into those. The first one we had was, and we can start with Evan since he introduced himself first, and just go down the line. When did you first become interested in science, and what led to your interest in marine and atmospheric science?
By the time I was in the 3rd grade, I had a telescope, a microscope, and a chemistry set. My father was a science teacher, and he said by the time I was 5 years old, I was asking him hundreds of questions per day, and he could answer them. And I used to be quite a fan of a television show called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And I pictured myself one day going to work every day with my briefcase in one hand and my scuba gear in the other, and feeding Flipper at lunchtime, but that's never, ever, ever happened. As a matter of fact, I'm an avid swimmer, and I don't scuba dive anymore, but I've never been required to scuba dive for work, but I have been in these little mini submarines called submersibles, and I've been down 2 miles looking at features underwater larger than the Grand Canyon, called submarine canyons, in a submersible called Alvin. Alvin is the one that did the dives on the Titanic. So I believe there was something about my involvement in atmospheric science, and it's just that I work in the same laboratory with the people like Heather who actually fly into hurricanes, and being around all that energy and seeing how important it is to our lifestyle, and here in South Florida, and especially with our being in a place where hurricanes kind of come here from time to time, I had an idea of how I could possibly improve the intensity forecast, and that's kind of how I began to study enough to be able to do some work in atmospheric science. Thank you.
Truth be told, I like science, but I never thought I'd end up working in a science laboratory. So for me, it was a serendipitous moment when my friend got a position in Washington to work, and he gave me his job, and I've never been happier. I am not interested in being a scientist in meteorology or oceanography or chemistry. I do dive, but I don't want to dive for work like Michael does. I just like diving. But I love technology, and the technology that we have that allows them to do the work that they want to do and that they're passionate about is why I work at AOML. I love computers. I like making them do whatever I want and supporting the research and the science that they do. Me doing it? No. Supporting them? Yes.
So like most meteorologists, I got interested in the weather at a very young age. I actually grew up in Wisconsin, and we're kind of on the edge of Tornado Alley up there. So we had lots of severe thunderstorms, and tornado sirens would go off lots of times during the summer, and I was terrified. So I started watching the Weather Channel and just got hooked on the weather, and learning about the weather helped me overcome my fear. And so as I got older, I continued watching the Weather Channel, and I found out you could fly into hurricanes. And as soon as I learned that, I decided that was what I wanted to do. And my dad was a pilot, so I grew up in planes, so it was just kind of a natural fit for me. And so I decided to go to school in Florida, since that was much closer to the tropics than Wisconsin, and the rest is history.
Michael, that would be you. Would you like me to unmute
My
you?
turn. Yep, no, I got it. Forgot the order. So I will throw a curveball in here, and I will say that I was never really interested in science growing up. I never really showed an interest. Instead, I was really big into film, and so I started at college as a film major, and took an undergraduate course for non-majors in biology. That was part of the required curriculum. And all of a sudden, I loved it. We focused on coastal biology, and it was super cool. I learned things that I'd never seen before, and I learned quickly after that my college also had a coral reef lab with a 2,000-gallon saltwater system where they grew and did research on corals, and from there I was hooked. And so now for the last decade, I've been focusing on coral reef science, and I've always tried to put myself in institutions that have great access to infrastructure support and engineering capabilities. So I did my PhD work at Florida Atlantic University's Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, which has decades of history with submersibles and robotic systems. And once I finished there, AOML was the next logical choice. We have such a rich history of working, meshing together research with predictive modeling, with weather forecasting, and it really represented a place where I could expand my horizons and grow out just from doing core work. So in such a short amount of time, I feel like I've really grown as a scientist, and hopefully will continue to grow from my time at AOML.
I'll keep my answer to that question is very brief. It's a lot similar to Alejandra's, where I kind of just like being in a position where I can help support other people work on the areas of research that they're into. So the lab is a great environment for that. I like being around the technology. I like seeing that our technology that we come up with get deployed and get utilized out in the field, either for expendable uses or for for us to deploy and take home and recover from autonomous drones or mooring work or expendable sensors that we toss overboard. It's for me as a professional, like just being an electrical engineer for a NOAA like a laboratory here. It's just a lot of fun to learn and try out new things, and there's never really it's a really great atmosphere to work in. So there's never really the kind of pressure to pump out anything unless it's something that I want to work on. So that's the gist of it for working at the lab so far.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, so we have our second question. How did you come to work for NOAA, and what experiences led to your current position? Evan, you want to kick us off? Evan, you're muted.
Okay, so I began to work for NOAA in the summer after my junior year in college, and I went from the biggest group at the lab, which was marine geology and geophysics, to the ocean chemistry division, to the office of the director. And one of the reasons I'm in the position that I am now, which is technically I'm a part of the computer services and networking group, because I have expertise in applications for Macintosh computers such as MATLAB and that sort of thing. But one of the ways I'm in the position that I am now, when everybody who started at the lab when I did 46 years ago or is already gone, is that I was just way too stubborn to quit. And I continued to not be afraid to learn something new. And, you know, I read voraciously. I read journal articles and I go to all the seminars or listen to them if I can and all that sort of thing. So it helps to be versatile because I love doing science. I love the scientific method. I love not knowing what I'm going to find out at the end of an investigation. And it's that gets me going. I wake up in the morning and I'm whistling. I can't wait to get to work because I don't know what I might find or discover or help with in a given day.
Thanks, Evan. Alejandra?
I arrived because a friend of mine had a position with HRD, the Hurricane Research Division, and he was going to Washington for a co-op position and offered me the job. I interviewed and I haven't left. And I enjoy the fact that I support people. I started with research. I worked in a group that no longer exists, which is Ocean Acoustics, which is basically making sonograms of the ocean and seeing what's in between the top layer where the boat is all the way down to the bottom and everything in between using sound. And I found that fascinating. And every time I thought about leaving and going into the private sector, I said to myself, where am I going to do this? I mean, I go on a ship, I spend 2 weeks in the ocean, I study things that no one else is studying. I help people do things that none of my peers were doing. I was tearing equipment up and putting it back together, kind of like what Diego does, but he does it way better than I ever did. And I would go out to sea and then I would come back and then I would do my job, which was to take the data and process it and share and give it to the scientists so that they can make the necessary, write the papers and the analysis and all the scientific stuff that they do. But I enjoy being able to solve problems and find solutions. And that's what this has offered me that some of my peers may not have. And that is that every day I have to solve a problem or I have to find a solution in the beginning to what I do. And now, yeah, infrastructure support is not as exciting. But if I don't do the work that I do, then my scientists, like Mike and Heather, they can't do their job either. So it's a really symbiotic relationship where if we need each other and we enjoy what we do respectively, but we also help each other out. Next.
So as I said when I introduced myself, my relationship with NOAA started while I was a grad student. I was fortunate to have a NOAA scientist at Florida State, which is where I did my graduate school, working at the center that I was a student at. And through that connection with that NOAA scientist, I was able to work with different scientists at the lab in Miami on my PhD project. And once I completed my PhD project, I became a postdoc at AOML. And it was my connection with FSU and the Northern Gulf Institute that really allowed that to happen. And since then, I have finished my postdoc and become an assistant in research. I'm a research faculty member of Florida State now, and I continue to work with the lab in Miami. And I've taken on the lead role for the SFMR since the prior scientists who were working with that have moved on. So that's it was pretty much knowing the right people that allowed me to get to where I am now and taking the initiative to connect with those people.
Now, just like Heather, I consider myself very fortunate that my experience working with NOAA predates my time here at AOML. During grad school, I was directly supported by another NOAA cooperative institute, the Cooperative Institute for Ocean Exploration, Research, and Technology, that was headquartered at Harbor Branch. And I learned very early on why working for a federal institute like NOAA is so attractive to scientists, because the research is designed from the ground up to be actionable. So there is a direct management or technology application for all of these research projects. So it feels less like you're just doing science in a void, but it feels like you're making real impacts on the world every day that you come into work and do science. And so I knew through my graduate career that I wanted to start a career in federal service at an organization like NOAA. And ever since, I've just been on the hunt for a position to open up. And so when my current position opened up, I jumped on it immediately. And I'm seeing my research take very different directions than what I did during my PhD. And honestly, that's okay. It's great. I'm learning so much, and I know that the work that I'm doing here at AOML has a real impact on management of coral reefs in Florida.
So my sequence of events that led me to work at NOAA were they don't quite add up to like how any scientist would join working at our lab. When I was growing up, I didn't even know I wanted to become an engineer. I kind of had a loose dream of wanting to become a session musician, and I didn't even work towards that. It was after I graduated with my electrical engineering, my bachelor's of science in that I was able to work briefly in the automotive industry up in Michigan at Ford for digital audio and vibration applications. And I eventually left and was tutoring for a little bit after that. And the one big thing that I noticed that I enjoyed out of all of my experiences before working at NOAA was that I like to be out in the field or interacting with clients or like just working with the product directly and seeing it in action. So when I was working at my job in Michigan before that, I had a friend who was working at the position that I hold now, and we would exchange job experiences, and we'd often joke how we thought we should have started off at each other's jobs first. So when he found an opportunity to go somewhere else, the job position opened up, and I got a recommendation and was invited to talk to the engineering group. We found out that we seemed like a pretty good fit for each other, and lo and behold, it's like I said before, every day I get to have the pleasure of working with like our tech, and just getting like an intuitive grasp and feel for how it interacts with the ocean and collects its data. And another exciting part of my job is trying to explain to this in as simplest terms as possible, because a lot of times we get a lot of people who just don't know what we're working on. They see that we're a federal lab and they panic, and usually they try to run away because we're the government. But usually when I'm able to at least give them the short synopsis of what we do and how our tech works, then they get pretty interested. And I think that's pretty cool when they're able to get a grasp of what we do and just ask more questions and want to learn more. To which, I always say, check out our webpage, check out our labs, check out our video. We got a lot of cool stuff going on. I think anyone can get this stuff, and I think anyone can be interested in it. So yeah, just having the hands-on element is what really drove me here to this position that I'm at now.
Thank you, Diego, and all of you. So I'm going to get to a few questions in the chat. I think that we may have covered part of this one, but I'd like to focus on the second half here. So David asks, as a sophomore in college at Western Kentucky University studying environmental science and minoring in international business, how can I find myself getting a job with NOAA or a related company in the field in Florida? What tips do you have to put myself out there and network with people from other states? So it seems like there's really no guidebook. You guys all have different paths of how you got there, but do you have any networking tips for David?
I could jump in on that. And I will have to say that given the events of this last year, the timing is really terrible for my advice. Honestly, my favorite parts of my job, aside from going into the field, are to go to conferences and interact with my peers. There's so much networking that can happen at these events. You meet all kinds of new people. That's really where these kinds of jobs get announced, because everybody's talking about it. Oh, I have this position coming up. You should definitely apply. So it all comes down to just talking to as many different people as you can. And with the pandemic in this past year, it's been really difficult to do a lot of that, as a lot of conferences shift towards more virtual hosting platforms rather than in person. But I think that with vaccines coming out and everything, that we'll be back in the swing of things and we'll be seeing each other in person. And so I would recommend to just try and get yourself out there as much as possible.
And I would add that in addition to getting networking, you bring in a good dynamic to the mix, because having a science degree along with a degree in international relations, you get the best of both worlds. You can take your knowledge and your ability to understand the science with the scientists and feed it to the people that are interested but don't have the knowledge base. You can translate that to them. You can be a bridge. So if you can emphasize that when you talk to people and say, I understand what you're talking about, but they have to understand it, and those are the people that you're going to be helping, that is something that as a science organization we need, which is one of the reasons why I got an MBA when I was a few years back. Because one of the emphasis that NOAA currently has is to take the science and transport it over into the real world. And people like you are going to be key to doing that. You understand the technology, you understand the science. Now you can help bring that over into the private sector, into the real world where people are doing that. And Heather is a good example, and so is Diego. They're taking real world. They're taking the science stuff. One is driving drones under the ocean. The other one is flying in the atmosphere through a hurricane. The other one is flying underneath the hurricane. And that information is put together, and we feed that to the National Hurricane Center, which feeds it to you, so that you can all decide what you're going to do in relation to the hurricane that may or may not be coming. So a degree in international relations is going to really serve you well in NOAA today.
That's great, Alejandra. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to chime in about networking?
Yes, I do. And it's somebody said to me recently that it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I've had over 20 interns work for me, college students and high school students. And some of them decided they didn't like research so much, and others went into it. But if you don't get your foot in the door, you won't really know if you enjoy the field that you're studying to get into. And then people who had the experience of being interns, and Alejandra's had quite a few interns too that I know of. It's a great way to get a letter of recommendation to get into college or graduate school or get another job. And we've had a number of people who worked at the lab as unpaid volunteers who've gone on to very nice, lucrative jobs afterwards. They came and saw exactly what we do, loved it, and decided to go further in the field. So.
Yeah, I would definitely echo the points that Michael and Evan made, in that, giving yourself opportunities to meet people and to let people get to know you are incredibly important for making those connections that will get you in the door. So, when you're at conferences, make an effort to talk to people that are doing work that you're interested in. And then when you talk to those people, maybe they have an opportunity for you to either do a small project with them or even an internship. And also, as an introvert who has become more extroverted through attending conferences, that was really a key thing for me, was that by putting myself out there, I forced myself to make those, conversations happen, and that helped me grow as a scientist as well.
Thank you, Heather. So Beatrice asks, how can I become a meteorologist who works for NOAA? I think we've covered that. And Heather, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with getting your bachelor's degree in meteorology or a related field. So meteorology is very heavy in physics and math. So we have a lot of meteorologists who start off in those fields and then go on and maybe get a master's degree in meteorology. But you really need to have a strong background in both physics and math and get at least a bachelor's degree. And then, internships and just like we were talking about, look for those sorts of opportunities. But getting that good, solid education is very important for meteorology.
Great, thank you. And then this one is for anyone. Anna asks, what new technologies or areas of focus are you excited to see grow in importance over the next 5 to 10 years? Technologies or areas of focus you're excited to see grow?
I think that, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Heather. You go.
Okay. I was going to say that one of the areas that I'm really excited about in terms of hurricanes is the use of small uncrewed aircraft. We've got 3 new aircraft that we're going to be testing out in the next few years that we launched from the NOAA P3 aircraft. And these aircraft can fly themselves and they're smaller and they can get into areas that are unsafe for the crewed aircraft to go into. So, that really near surface area where I study that we can't go with the P3s. Well, these uncrewed aircraft, or SUAS as we tend to call them, can get down in that area and get extremely useful measurements that we can't get right now. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes and how much we can learn from those observations, because that is really one of the largest regions that we don't know enough about right now, and I think could really help with forecasting of hurricanes.
I want to mention to Heather that I was so glad to see the introduction and perfection, I want to call it perfection, or improvement of the step frequency, microwave, SFMRI, whatever. Because prior to that, when I first began to do a little bit of work in tropical meteorology, I was part of the demo project for that satellite QuickScat. And I was so disappointed when I found out that all of those wind speeds were just estimates, right? But I found out that satellite data is better than nothing and all that. So I'm happy, to see the advances that are being made with how accurate those measurements of what the wind speed is at the surface are. And the other thing that I'm really excited about is considering that we need to take care of our planet, and the advancements that are being made in things like coral health, for example. Knowing how much of our coral reefs are already destroyed beyond repair, people like Michael are coming up with ways to not only monitor their health, but to sort of grow in the laboratory little corals and replant them. That's like one of the most exciting things in the world, if you ask me. But we need to look at what we can do to make sure that our planet remains inhabitable and help it to recover from the damage we've done to it as humans.
Where we're going to be, where we're going to, I'm sorry, where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. I know it's a wonder technology, isn't it? Where we're going to be in the next 5 or 10 years in science and technology is really dependent on the people like us that are doing it, and the people like you that are starting to decide what you want to do with your career. So for us, we're involved, and you can be involved, like we've all said, with internships. But where we end up is where your curiosity wants to take us. Because if you don't have the curiosity, we have the curiosity. But if you don't have the curiosity, then it's like, well, where do I want to go? So it's where you want to go. If in 5 years you want to take that uncrewed, whatever Heather's flying in the middle of nowhere, and make it even more robust so that instead of it falling through and just floating there and then eventually going into the water and disappearing, you turn it into a device that gets thrown out of a P3, flies through the column, hits the water and continues flying underwater, and Diego takes over. That is outrageous. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Damn. So Diego, think about it. You see what I mean? So it really is where we are going to be in the next 5 years and where we're going to be in the next 10 years is dependent on us to continue with the work that we're doing, but it's also dependent on you to decide, come up with ideas. And most of them are not going to work, but one of them will, and that's the one that matters.
We could call it the Coyote Glider.
Thanks, Alejandra. I want to put Diego on the spot and see what do you see for this question? What instruments have you built that are maybe exciting that you'd want to share?
I think that we've been working with that I would like to, that I'm definitely interested in seeing develop more often, is the use of autonomous systems underwater. For some who aren't aware, in our physical oceanography division, we have what we call a glider program, where we have a fleet of I think maybe around 10 units or so of these long yellow and sturdy like drones, and they typically follow a track that we program out at the beginning of every hurricane season, and with very limited interaction like throughout the week. They usually follow their track and collect data about what we want to study in the waters, typically for analyzing the waters and how they change during a hurricane season. So it's exciting to see like how the information we deliver back to the lab and deliver back to like the people who help us work on these systems, to see how it's going to develop these instruments go on in the future. Especially since it's a much cheaper, safer solution for oceanographers and their teams, instead of having to send out a full crew and a ship and spend the time, the fuel, and the money and the safety to have them navigate these areas that are high risk. Another thing is probably Internet of Things. So like applications that I'm interested in seeing develop more. I would like to see being used more often. So just having to create a network of sensors, for instance, in some area that we're trying to monitor, and have them be able to talk to each other and and have that system be able to make decisions just based on how one sensor interacts with, like, provides information to the other. I'm interested in seeing a lot more activity with other groups in utilizing that technology. Because every day, even among consumers, like on land, the electronics that we use and the computer systems that we use, there's a lot we can be applying towards ocean sciences. It's just a matter of just trying to get over the obstacles of how to implement that into ocean sciences. But that's the struggle, but that's also the fun challenge that we're trying to work on too. So,
could I jump in and add one thing that builds off of everything that everybody has said? So when I started in grad school, we did a lot of work with robotic vehicles, and generally that involves a large ship that can handle that vehicle and a dedicated crew that can operate it, and teams of scientists that can identify organisms as they're watching the video feed in real time. Now that was generally limited to 10 to 20 different people on board the ship. And by the end of my graduate career, there were now these live streamed events where ships could have a crew that had chief scientists on board. They had the ROV pilots, and they were live streaming video from miles beneath the surface. And so experts from all over the world were tuning in near real time, and were able to identify organisms that were thousands of miles apart. and students would tune in to these broadcasts, and they would get to learn what is really at the bottom of the ocean. And it really got people interested, and brought the expertise to a global scale. I mean, never before have we been able to have essentially dozens of chief scientists offering input at any given time, and be able to have that kind of networking ability, all at the speed of data. And so I cannot wait to see what happens in this next decade, to see, maybe we'll be able to live stream robotic operations to the entire world, and have participation of thousands of people at once. And that really excites me. I think that is where we're headed, and I can't wait, frankly.
Thank you, Michael. So the next one is for Heather. Heather, I'm gonna rope two of them together. So what is the most powerful hurricane? Sorry, Christian asks, what is the most powerful hurricane you have ever flown through? And as a follow-up, Nicholas wants to know, Heather, have you ever thought about studying tornadoes?
So the strongest hurricane I've flown in was Hurricane Lane, which was out in the Pacific. It was the first time we actually took the P3s out to Hawaii for hurricane flights. So it was a really exciting mission for me. Not only was it our first set of hurricane flights from Hawaii, it was also that Category 5 Lane flight was our first flight with an all-female scientist crew on the P3, which was super exciting to be able to share that with my colleagues. So that was a very, very exciting flight for me. The Central Pacific Hurricane Center was able to get their first look at the extra data that we could provide compared to the Air Force, since we have research instruments on our plane that the Air Force doesn't. So they were able to see our radar data, for instance, for the first time, and get an understanding of the extra information that they can get on the hurricanes from our instruments. So overall, that was just such a wonderful experience on multiple different facets. I have not seriously thought about studying tornadoes because they still terrify me. They change very quickly compared to hurricanes. So it's a lot easier to plan for studying a hurricane compared to a tornado, although our P3s do fly supercell experiments in the off season of hurricane season. So they've flown a couple field campaigns over the last few years, one called Taurus and one called Vortex Southeast, where they've taken the P3s and flown around supercell tornadoes that are developing tornadoes, and some that did develop tornadoes, and used our radars to get a really good look at those storms. So there is that potential. I've heard those flights are a little bit more turbulent than the hurricane flights. So I'll stick with the hurricanes.
Thank you, Heather. And then there's one here. Can maybe one of you or some of you go over what is a day in the life of your job? What does the day look like? I know we're in a kind of an unprecedented situation, but you think you could feel that?
For me, if no one is complaining, that means I've done my job as an infrastructure support person. So if nobody's knocking on my door and it looks like I'm sitting at my desk doing absolutely nothing, that means that I'm doing my job properly because everything is working. When it's not working, then I'm sweating.
So my day really depends on the time of year. So right now, when it's not hurricane season, I'm typically at my desk on my computer all day, doing a variety of things from research, which involves programming computer code to analyze the data that we've collected with the P3s and study various different scientific questions. I also spend time preparing presentations for conferences or workshops or webinars. I write proposals to get funding for my work. And I also write manuscripts to publish my research, which is one of the really important aspects, is to be able to get your results all out there. You publish in a scientific journal that undergoes peer review. So that's primarily how most of my year goes. But when it's hurricane season, things change. From about mid-July through mid-October or late October is our busy time for the hurricane season, typically with flights. Every day we're keeping an eye on the tropics. We hold a map discussion where we talk about where development might occur. If there is a storm, what might happen with it, and we put a plan together on if we are going to go out and fly. Now, if we do go and fly, and I am asked to go and take part in those flights, that involves typically going to Lakeland, Florida, which is where the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center is, who manages and takes care of all the aircraft. And so we'll go there. Sometimes we forward deploy to the Caribbean, or for instance, Hawaii, as I mentioned earlier. And then we go into flying, and that involves showing up about 2 hours before takeoff. We go through a briefing with the crew. Then about an hour before, we go on to the aircraft and we get settled in, and we do another briefing to make sure everybody understands the plan. And then we fly for 8 to 10 hours. And then we come back, we debrief, and then we go get some sleep and food, and we do it all again until we don't need to fly anymore. So very different parts of my day depending on what time of year it is. Very different speeds too.
I'll hop in next. That's all right. So I would say there's like two modes to a normal day in the life for me. One when I'm out at sea, and then one when I'm normally in the lab or working from home. So when I'm out at sea, usually I'm kind of sort of the acting ocean janitor or just technician that's just making sure that all the systems that we've developed or maintained over the years, to make sure that they're still up and running. It can be anything from just when it comes to troubleshooting our equipment, to just asking the question, like, is it plugged in, or did we turn it on? Or to having to swap out parts in our CTD frame, which is a metal frame that holds a lot of our sensors that read and feedback like real-time data about ocean parameters that scientists want to look at. And then so usually when I'm out there, I'll be out for like maybe a couple of weeks to like a month at a time, just doing those duties. When I'm at the lab or as I'm working from home, I'd say like in terms of my electrical engineering role, there's not like a specific duty that I'm doing. Our group is sort of like a jack of all trades, like master of none sort of structure, where we'll do everything, including from coming up with a design for like an idea we want to implement with some scientists, designing the prototype, testing the prototype, testing out all the different parts of the prototype, implementing them. And then once we have something working off of our prototype, which for the electrical engineers, we usually write firmware and build hardware off of like Arduino projects, so they're cheap and very easy to use and code in. Then we'll spin our own boards, so we'll get our own board design and we'll send them out for manufacturing and have them populated out like with a supplier, or we'll do it ourselves. And once we get it back, we'll make sure that everything's been assembled correctly, throw it out in the field for deployment and testing. So as far as an engineering role goes, it's really great for just getting to try a little bit of everything for like in the engineering industry.
Hey, thank you, Michael. Did you have anything to add about the day in the life?
Being a coral scientist is all about expecting the unexpected, especially when you live in a place like Miami where we have reefs in our backyard. So it's great because we can hop in a boat, and go out to a reef, do monitoring, do sampling, anything we want. But as a result, we have a lot of really diverse projects. And so despite being in a mostly remote setting right now, we also maintain a wet lab space on the university campus that allows us to conduct experiments year round. So we have a flow through seawater system. And for example, today I was in all day to sample an experiment that has now been running for the last 2.5 months with some corals from that were collected from the Port of Miami. So we do a lot of experimental work in the lab. We also do quite a bit of field work. So some days may start at 6 a.m. to go diving either in Miami or down in the Florida Keys. Other times we'll prep for longer term deployments offshore in the Caribbean or off of Texas at the Flower Garden banks. So it keeps me on my toes. And there are many days where I find that I'm trying to accomplish 3 or 4 tasks at once. So it's always exciting. I will say that.
Great, thank you, Michael. We are getting so many questions. These are great. But can I maybe start Evan off with one more? What advice would you give your younger self or to someone just starting their career?
The advice I would give to my younger self or somebody just starting career is, first of all, I don't know if the audience noticed it, but everybody in this group, aside from me, probably wrote computer programs already by the time they got to AOML, right, Heather? I heard you mention the programming. I know about Alex and Diego and Michael. I don't know what you. So I learned, well, when I was in college, they didn't really have computers except that filled a whole room or something. But so I would learn computer programming. I'd learn a couple of different languages, and I would study writing more because it's crucially important to just to get the funding to do your research project, that you be able to write a proposal that expresses the idea you have, what you're looking to do, that once you've designed an experiment to collect the data to see if your hypothesis is true or not, and then writing. And that's one of the things that I found hardest about being getting the work that I've done, the research I've done in tropical meteorology, is there's this really detailed process. I mean, submitting papers, and I have never had to work with co-authors who at a moment's or day's notice would have to get up and go and deploy into a hurricane and be gone for a week and a half. It's been really difficult for me. So I focused on writing and other communication skills and learning computer programming because it's essential to doing the most basic of research at this stage.
Thank you. And anyone else like to chime in? What advice would you give your younger self or someone just starting out in their career?
I would say that any dream you have is not too big. If you are really passionate about it, you'll find a way to make it happen. You know, who would have thought growing up in Wisconsin, landlocked, aside from the Great Lakes, that I would have, been able to get to a point where I can fly into hurricanes. I thought that was kind of a far reach when I was starting out, and it turns out that it was very doable. So don't let any dream that you have that you think might be too big hold you back. And also don't be afraid to ask questions, no matter how much you think that it might not be a good question. I guarantee you somebody else around you has that same question. And you never know where that question might lead.
Don't let anybody tell you you can't. A lot of people told me I couldn't or that I shouldn't. And I said, I doubted myself for this much. And then I said, they don't know what they're talking about, and here I am. And so if it's something that you like and something that you enjoy, go for it. Just do it. The worst that can happen is you fall and you scrape your knees, and then you get up, you clean your knees, and you keep moving on to the next thing. Every one of us has fallen. Every one of us has made mistakes. Every one of us has done wrong. I have broken computers in the middle of a project. It's cost time and money, but it happens. But you get up, you fix the problem, and you move forward in whatever way you can. So don't be afraid. Somebody tells you no, say, okay, and keep doing it anyway. Unless it's illegal, then definitely don't do it. But if it's about studying and what career you want, and if this is something that you're interested in, don't let anybody tell you no. And the one thing about NOAA that you need to understand is that we study everything from the sun, from solar flares to the bottom of the ocean. And it doesn't matter if you're not really good at math. If you like science, it doesn't matter. You can still work for NOAA because we need all the different careers. We're all scientists and we're engineers, and that's what most of you might be interested in. But if there's somebody out there that wants to work for NOAA but doesn't really want to do the engineering part, we need you. So don't hesitate to come out and try. You can volunteer. I mean, we could not do this without Christina, who you are not seeing, but she's also NOAA, because our technology knowledge and our scientific knowledge does not give us the skills to really set this up and make it happen for you. She's the one that does it. And she's not a scientist. Well, I don't think she is. But please, don't let anybody tell you you can't do it.
Thank you, Alejandra. Okay, so that is all the time we have. So I have some links here. So there's a lot of great questions in the chat. We didn't get to all of them, but I would like to get to all of those. So I have an email, a couple of pages, things that I have found that I'm going to stick in here. So let's just thank our panelists one more time for their time, and also a big thank you to everyone in the audience for being a part of the AOML Virtual Open House. We hope you enjoyed the webinar as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. And for more information on future outreach activities, please visit our Outreach and Education page, which I will put in the chat. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Are we still live?
Yeah, I was just checking to make sure that the links went through.
Well, I learned a lot, even though we're live. I learned a lot today about what Diego does. I mean, we all work together, and Mike, you're new to us. Welcome. But I really learned a lot. I thought it was interesting. I'm sitting here smiling, going, wow, this is really interesting. This is really cool. I hope they're thinking the same thing, because I think it was cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And Michael, when you were talking about getting out there and all that, I got to do dives in a Johnson Sea Link because the scientists, the chief scientist of NOAA's National Ocean Survey at that time, saw me give a talk at a conference on submarine canyons.
Amazing.
He had already had a proposal to do dive time, and he invited me to come on their expedition. That was like crazy, amazing fun. And it's the only sub I've ever done dives in that I wasn't scared the whole time.
Yeah, they had.
I just dropped on the bottom 2 miles down in a landslide, okay, underwater landslide. That when I wasn't sure if I'd ever see the light of day again, you know. So, but safety procedures.
The best crew in the world.
The safety procedures there. They even taught me how to raise the sub if the pilot had a heart attack or passed out or something, you know.
Oh.
So it was, you know.
It was an amazing crew, and since they've now shut down the submersible program at Harbor Branch, most of the crew have moved on, but one of the former subcrew members is now the dive safety officer for